What happens when a wealthy man fires the housekeeper who risked everything to save his life? A few words from her leave him shattered. Jason Harlow's mansion towered over the city skyline like a modern-day fortress, a testament to his immense wealth and unyielding ambition. Yet, behind the opulent walls, the man himself was crumbling. Jason, a billionaire tech entrepreneur, was once hailed as a visionary. But the fire that drove his success had long turned to ash. He moved through life like a ghost, his days consumed by endless meetings and hollow accomplishments. Though surrounded by luxury, Jason was haunted by memories of his late sister, Mia. He blamed himself for the accident that took her life, and, in his guilt, he pushed away anyone who tried to get close. Miles away, in a modest apartment, Emma Scott started her day well before sunrise. Her two daughters, Ava and Clara, slept soundly as Emma prepared breakfast and packed their lunches. Life had been a relentless series of struggles since her husband passed away, but Emma's determination never wavered. When she received a call offering her a housekeeping job at the Harlow estate, she felt a glimmer of hope. The pay promised a better future for her children, and though she was nervous about working for someone like Jason Harlow, she was ready for the challenge. The Harlow estate was everything Emma had imagined and more. The ornate gates, manicured gardens, and towering glass walls were unlike anything she had ever seen. Arriving in her aging sedan, she couldn't help but feel out of place. But as she stepped through the grand entrance, she reminded herself of why she was here, to create a better life for her daughters. Inside, she was met by Mr. Charles, the estate's head butler, whose demeanor was as polished as the marble floors. "You'll find Mr. Harlow to be demanding," he said, handing her a meticulous list of duties. "Follow these rules to the letter and you'll avoid trouble." Emma's first encounter with Jason was brief but impactful. As she passed through the grand hallway, he appeared at the top of the staircase, his expression as cold as his steel blue eyes. "Just do your work and stay out of my way," he instructed, before retreating to his study. Jason's indifference might have intimidated others, but Emma was no stranger to hardship. She resolved to do her job with quiet determination, never imagining that her strength and compassion would soon collide with Jason's carefully guarded world, forcing both of them to confront truths they had long ignored. Days at the Harlow estate followed a rigid schedule. From the moment Emma arrived, she was expected to work silently and efficiently. Despite the mansion's grandeur, it was devoid of life-ino laughter, no music. Only the faint hum of distant machines and the echo of Jason's solitary footsteps. Mr. Charles ensured every corner was spotless, reminding Emma that Jason demanded perfection. Yet, she couldn't shake the sense that beneath Jason's cold exterior lay a man weighed down by something deeper than the demands of his success. Emma's thoughts often drifted to her daughters, Ava and Clara. They were the reason she endured the pressure and long hours. Every evening when her shift ended, Emma would return home to their hugs and hopeful smiles. She told them stories about her day, leaving out the parts where Jason barely acknowledged her existence or when Mr. Charles scolded her for the smallest mistakes. Emma's resolve to succeed only strengthened. But everything changed one evening when Jason returned home unexpectedly early. Stumbling through the door, he looked pale and disoriented. Emma watched from a distance as he clutched his chest, gasping for air. Without hesitation, she rushed to his side, shouting for Mr. Charles to call an ambulance. The paramedics arrived quickly, and Jason was rushed to the hospital. Emma, shaken but composed, stayed behind to ensure the house was in order. She couldn't ignore the fear she had seen in Jason's eyes. It was the first time his unflappable facade had cracked, revealing a vulnerability she hadn't thought possible. That night, Emma prayed for his recovery not out of obligation, but because she saw a man who desperately needed saving, even from himself. When Jason returned a few days later, he was physically better but emotionally distant. He avoided eye contact and spoke even less than usual, retreating to his study for hours on end. Mr. Charles informed Emma that Jason had insisted on no changes to the household routine. Still, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Then, one afternoon as she was cleaning his library, Emma discovered a small, weathered journal tucked away behind a row of books. Its cover bore the initials, H. Curious. She opened it to find sketches and letters, all addressed to someone named Mia. The sorrow in Jason's words was palpable. Emma placed the journal back where she found it, her heart heavy with questions about the pain Jason kept hidden. The days following Jason's return from the hospital were a delicate balancing act. Emma noticed subtle changes in his demeanor. While he remained distant, there were fleeting moments when he seemed lost in thought, as though grappling with something he couldn't quite articulate. His usual sharp commands softened, and once, Emma even caught him watching her as she worked. A trace of curiosity in his otherwise guarded expression. It was as if the man behind the wealth and walls was starting to crack. Emma's routine continued as usual, but her discovery of the journal weighed heavily on her mind. She had no intention of prying into Jason's past, but the raw emotion in the pages she'd glimpsed made it impossible to ignore. The name Mia echoed in her thoughts, and though she didn't know who Mia was, it was clear she had been a cornerstone of Jason's life. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that this unspoken loss was the root of his isolation. Meanwhile, Emma's son, 10-year-old Daniel, and 7-year-old Clara, became increasingly curious about her work. "What's it like working for a rich man, Mom?" Daniel asked one evening over dinner. Emma chuckled softly. "It's different. But remember, we work hard for what we have." One weekend, Emma reluctantly brought Daniel and Clara to the estate after a babysitting arrangement fell through. She assured Mr. Charles it would be a one-time occurrence. Jason, surprisingly, didn't object when he saw the children. In fact, the sight of Daniel and Clara seemed to catch him off guard. As the two explored the grand hallways, their laughter filled the empty mansion, bringing a strange warmth Jason hadn't felt in years. Daniel, always the curious one, wandered into Jason's study while Emma was cleaning nearby. Jason found the boy flipping through one of his old sketchbooks. "What are you doing here?" Jason's voice was stern but lacked its usual edge. Daniel looked up, unafraid. "Did you draw these? They're really good." Jason hesitated, his first instinct to scold the boy melting under the child's genuine admiration. "Yes," he admitted finally. "A long time ago." Daniel's simple question opened a door Jason hadn't approached in years. "Why did you stop drawing?" Jason stared at the sketches, memories flooding back. "Sometimes life makes you forget the things you love," he replied quietly. Emma overheard the exchange from the doorway, her heart softening at the unexpected interaction. From that moment, Daniel became a frequent visitor to Jason's study. The boy's curiosity and boundless energy seemed to chip away at Jason's stoic exterior. He began showing Daniel some of his old drawings and even teaching him basic techniques. For the first time in years, Jason smiled, not a fleeting smirk, but a genuine, heartfelt expression. Emma watched this budding connection with cautious hope. She noticed how Jason's interactions with Daniel brought out a gentler side of him. But Jason wasn't the only one affected. Daniel started talking about Jason's lessons with a newfound enthusiasm. "Mom, did you know Mr. Harlow used to design buildings? He said he could teach me to draw too." Despite the small changes, Jason's pain remained a silent undercurrent. One evening, as Emma cleared the library, Jason approached her. "Your son, he's a bright kid, reminds me of someone." His voice trailed off, and Emma felt the weight of the unspoken name Mia. "Thank you," she replied softly, but the fragile peace was short-lived. A few days later, Emma found herself in trouble. While cleaning the library, she accidentally knocked over a framed photo, cracking the glass. Jason walked in at that exact moment, his expression darkening. "Do you have any idea how important that is?" he snapped. Emma immediately apologized, but his anger didn't subside. "If you can't be careful, maybe you don't belong here," he said, storming out. Shaken, Emma considered leaving, but her children's future depended on this job, and she couldn't let a single mistake derail her efforts. She resolved to stay, even if it meant enduring Jason's temper. Later that night, as she passed by the study, she saw Jason sitting alone, staring at the cracked photo. The expression on his face wasn't anger, it was sorrow. Emma realized then that his harsh reaction had less to do with her mistake and more to do with the memory tied to the photo. The next day, Emma's son Daniel returned to the estate with her permission to help with minor tasks. His curiosity once again led him to Jason, who was in his study. Daniel noticed the cracked photo on Jason's desk and asked innocently, "Is that someone you loved?" Jason hesitated, his gaze softening as he looked at the boy. "Yes, that's my sister Mia," he admitted. Daniel nodded, his youthful wisdom shining through. Mom says people we love never really leave us. They stay in our hearts, even when we can't see them anymore. Jason was caught off guard by the simplicity and truth of Daniel's words. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the photo.
You are a wise kid,
he said finally. A faint smile. Daniel beamed, proud of the compliment. From that moment, Jason began to let his guard down, allowing both Emma and Daniel a closer glimpse of the man behind the walls. As Jason grew closer to Daniel, Emma noticed subtle changes in the atmosphere of the house. Jason began spending time outside his study, occasionally joining Daniel for games or walks in the garden. Emma watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with gratitude and hope. Her son's laughter echoed through the once quiet mansion, filling it with a warmth she hadn't thought possible. One evening, as they all gathered in the garden, Daniel asked Jason about his happiest memory. Jason was quiet for a long moment before answering. We'd stay up all night, drawing the stars and making up stories about constellations. His voice trembled slightly, but he continued. She was my best friend. I didn't realize how much I needed her until she was gone. Emma placed a comforting hand on Jason's arm, her touch grounding him. You still have the chance to honor her, she said softly. Maybe it's time to stop running from the pain and start living the way she would have wanted you to. Jason looked at her, his defenses crumbled. For the first time in years, he felt understood not as a billionaire, but as a man carrying the weight of loss. But just as the fragile peace began to settle, another storm loomed on the horizon. Charles, the butler, discovered Emma's earlier access to Jason's journal. Convinced it was a violation of trust, he reported the incident to Furious, Jason confronted Emma, his voice cold and cutting. I trusted you to do your job. Emma's attempts to explain fell on deaf ears, and Jason made a snap decision. You are fired, he declared, his tone firm. Emma was stunned. She packed her belongings in silence, holding back tears as Daniel stood by her side, confused and upset. As they left the mansion, Daniel turned to Jason and said, You are wrong about my mom. She's someone who cares. His words hit Jason like a thunderbolt, but his pride wouldn't let him respond. Emma and Daniel walked away, leaving Jason alone with the echoes of his act. Jason Harlow sat in his empty mansion, the silence now heavier than ever. Daniel's words echoed in his mind. She's someone who cares. The boy's unwavering defense of his mother stirred something deep within Jason, a combination of guilt and shame he couldn't ignore. He picked up the cracked photo of Mia, tracing its edges as memories of her kindness and compassion filled his thoughts. She wouldn't have walked away, he murmured to himself. Days passed, and the absence of Emma and Daniel became glaringly apparent. The house felt colder, lifeless in ways it hadn't before. Jason struggled to focus on work. The same tasks that had once consumed him now seemed meaningless. Each time he tried to push forward, he found himself remembering Emma's quiet strength and Daniel's infectious curiosity. For the first time in years, Jason admitted to himself that he didn't want to be alone anymore. Meanwhile, Emma and Daniel returned to their modest apartment. Emma threw herself into finding a new job, trying to shield her children from the pain of what had happened. But Daniel couldn't let it go. Mom, why did Mr. Harlow fire you? You helped him, he asked one evening, his voice tinged with frustration. Emma sighed, pulling her son close. Sometimes people don't know how to handle their feelings, Dan. That doesn't mean we stop caring about them. One evening, as Emma was helping Clara with homework, a knock echoed through their small apartment. When Emma opened the door, she was stunned to see Jason standing there, holding a bouquet of sunflowers, the kind she had mentioned once in passing, as his usually composed demeanor was replaced with vulnerability. I was wrong, Jason said, his voice low but sincere. You didn't deserve the way I treated you. I let my own fears and pain cloud my judgment, and I made a mistake, one I deeply regret. Emma was speechless. Jason continued, Daniel said, you care, and you cared when no one else did, and I didn't know how to accept it. Jason glanced past Emma and saw Daniel peeking from behind her, his eyes wide with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Hey Daniel, Jason said, his voice softening. You were right about your mom. She's an incredible person, and I owe both of you an apology. Daniel stepped forward, crossing his arms. Why did you fire her then? He asked, his bluntness catching Jason off. Jason knelt to Daniel's level, meeting his gaze. Because I was scared. I've spent so much time trying to shut people out that I forgot what it feels like to trust someone. But your mom, she reminded me what it means to care again. Daniel studied Jason for a moment before glancing at Emma. Mom, can we go back to the man? Emma's heart softened, but she wasn't ready to forgive so easily. Jason, words are one thing, but actions are another. What do you really want from? She asked, her voice steady but firm. Jason stood, his resolve clear. I want to make things right. Not just by hiring you back, but by being the kind of person who deserves your and I'd like to start by showing both of you something. Curiosity piqued, Emma agreed, and the three of them returned to the Harlow. The mansion, which once felt cold and empty, now seemed to hold a different energy. Jason led them to his study, where a large canvas was propped up on it. I've been working on this since you left, he said, pulling away the cover to reveal a painting of a vibrant family garden filled with sunlight, laughter. It's not finished, Jason admitted, but it's how I imagine the mansion could feel alive again, full of connection. And I want both of you to help me bring it to Emma. I want to hire you, not as a housekeeper, but as the manager of a foundation I am starting. I want to use this estate to help children like Daniel and families like yours. Emma was stunned, her heart pounding as she processed his words. You'd do all this? For us? She asked. Jason, for you, for Daniel, and for Mia. She would have wanted me to turn my pain into something meaningful, and you showed me how to. Daniel beamed, rushing to the painting to admire the detail. Can we really do this, Mom? He asked, his excitement contagious. Emma looked at Jason, her skepticism melting under the sincerity in his. If you are serious, Jason, then yes, we'll help you. In that moment, something the walls Jason had built around his heart began to crumble, replaced by a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He reached out to Emma, who hesitated before shaking his. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Over the next few weeks, Jason, Emma, and Daniel began working together to bring Jason's vision for the foundation to. The transformation of the Harlow estate into a hub for hope and connection wasn't just a physical change, it was a deeply emotional journey for all. Jason poured himself into the project with an enthusiasm that surprised even. He worked with architects and designers to repurpose parts of the mansion into community spaces, including classrooms, an art studio, and a playground. Emma took charge of coordinating the foundation's outreach efforts. Her warmth and tenacity made her a natural leader, and her personal story resonated with the families they were hoping. She reached out to local schools, shelters, and community organizations, inviting them to partner with the foundation. Meanwhile, Daniel became the unofficial ambassador of the project, his excitement infectious as he shared his ideas with anyone who would. One day, as they were reviewing plans in the study, Jason pulled out Mia's old sketchbook. He handed it to Emma with a faint. Mia dreamed of creating something like this, he said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. She used to talk about a place where people could heal and grow together. I ignored her back then, too caught up in my own. But now, I think it's time to make her dream a reality. Emma carefully flipped through the sketchbook, her eyes landing on a drawing of a large garden filled with flowers, benches, and children. It's beautiful, she said softly. Jason nodded. It's what this place should have been all along. The breakthrough came when Jason hosted a community meeting at the estate to introduce the foundations. The grand hall was filled with families, teachers, and volunteers. As Jason stood before them, he felt a wave of nervousness he hadn't experienced in years. Public speaking wasn't his forte, but this time it wasn't about business, it was I've spent most of my life building walls, Jason began, his voice steady but heartfelt. Walls to protect myself, to keep others. But those walls don't just keep pain away, they keep love and connection out. This project is my way of tearing those walls down, one brick at a time. The room erupted into applause, and for the first time, Jason felt the warmth of genuine. Emma stood nearby, her eyes shining with pride. Daniel clapped enthusiastically, leaning over to whisper, "You did great, Mr. Harlow." Jason chuckled, ruffling the boys. As the foundation took shape, Jason found himself rediscovering parts of himself he thought were lost. He began spending more time with Emma and Daniel, their presence filling the void he'd carried for so long. Daniel, ever curious, often asked Jason about his past, prompting conversations Jason had avoided for years. Daniel asked one evening as they worked on a puzzle in the living room. Jason smiled faintly, his eyes soft. She was brilliant, the kind of person who could make anyone feel seen and valued. She loved art, music, and helping people. This place, it would have been her parrot. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. I think she'd be really happy with what we're doing. One afternoon, as they were planting flowers in the estate's new garden, Emma noticed Jason struggling to lift a heavy pot. "Let me help," she said, stepping in without hesitation. Jason paused, a wry smile on his face. "I am not used to needing help," he admitted. Emma, "Well, get used to it. You are not doing this alone anymore." Their shared laughter filled the air, a sound that seemed to breathe life into the mansion. Jason realized then just how much Emma had come to mean to him, not just as a partner in the foundation, but as someone who had pulled him back from the... The final piece of the puzzle came when Jason held a private memorial for Mia in the newly completed garden. He invited Emma, Daniel, and a few close friends to join him in planting a tree in her... As he placed the last handful of soil around the sapling, he spoke with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. "Mia always believed in second chances," he said, his voice. "This tree is a reminder that life goes on, even after loss. And this foundation is my second chance to honor her, to make amends, and to open my heart again." Tears filled Emma's eyes as she reached for Jason's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. Daniel looked up at Jason, his admiration clear. "Mia would be proud," he said simply. Jason smiled, his heart full for the first time in years. As they stood together under the fading sunlight, Jason realized that he had found something far more valuable than wealth. He had found the Harlow Foundation's grand opening was a moment of triumph for everyone involved. Families and children from across the city poured into the estate, now transformed into a sanctuary of hope and opportunity. The once sterile halls were now alive with laughter, conversation, and the bright energy of people eager to build a better future. Jason stood by the entrance, greeting visitors alongside Emma. Her organizational skills had ensured everything ran smoothly, from the day's schedule to the placement of every flower in the garden. "You've done an incredible job," Jason told her, his voice filled with gratitude. Emma smiled warmly. "We've done an incredible job. None of this would have been possible without you." Jason's attention was drawn to Daniel, who was leading a group of children through the new art studio. The space, filled with easels, brushes, and colorful paints, was a direct homage to Mia's love for creativity. Jason watched as Daniel proudly showed off a drawing he had made of the garden, his enthusiasm contagious. For the first time, Jason saw his late sister's dream come alive, not just in the space, but in the joy it brought to those who needed it most. In the weeks following the opening, Jason, Emma, and Daniel fell into a comfortable rhythm. Jason's once hectic schedule now revolved around the foundation's activities, and he found himself spending more time with Emma and her family. The estate, once a symbol of his isolation, had become a place of community and connection. One evening, after a long day of meetings and events, Jason invited Emma and her children to join him for dinner in the estate's dining room. It was the first time they had all shared a meal there, and the atmosphere was warm and lively. Daniel recounted his adventures in the art studio, while Clara spoke excitedly about the new playground. Jason listened intently, his smile growing with every story. Midway through dinner, Jason cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "I've been meaning to tell you something," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've decided to rename the foundation. It'll be called Mia's Haven, in honor of my sister and everything she stood for." Emma's eyes softened, and Daniel clapped his hands in approval. "That's perfect," the boy exclaimed. Jason chuckled. "I thought so too." He glanced at Emma, his expression sincere. "And it's not just for Mia, it's for all of us. For second chances, for hope, and for the people who remind us what really matters." The dinner ended with laughter and shared memories. But for Jason, it was a quiet revelation. He realized that the life he had spent years running from, the one filled with love, vulnerability, and connection, was the life he now wanted to embrace. In the following days, Jason approached Mr. Charles, the estate's butler, who had remained loyal but cautious throughout the foundation's transformation. "You were right," Jason said, extending a hand. "I let my pain rule my decisions for too long, but that's changing now." Mr. Charles, surprised but pleased, shook Jason's hand. "It's good to see you finding your way, sir. I think Mia would be proud." With every passing day, Jason's relationships with Emma and her children deepened. The foundation grew, touching lives far beyond the estate. But it was the small, quiet moments helping Clara with her homework, or teaching Daniel how to sketch that brought Jason the most joy. As weeks turned into months, the Harlow estate underwent a complete transformation, not just in its purpose, but in the lives it touched. Jason found himself surrounded by people who once seemed unimaginable in his world. Children from underserved communities, parents seeking hope for their families, and volunteers eager to contribute to something meaningful. The mansion that once echoed with emptiness now brimmed with life and purpose. Emma flourished in her new role as the foundation's manager. She had a natural gift for connecting with people and finding solutions to challenges, whether it was securing funding or organizing workshops for families. Jason admired her resilience and dedication, often wondering how she managed to balance her work at the foundation with raising 2 children. One quiet afternoon, Jason noticed Daniel sitting alone in the garden sketching. He joined the boy, curious about what he was drawing. "What's this?" Jason asked, pointing at the paper. Daniel grinned. "It's the garden, but with a fountain. I thought it would look nice here." Jason smiled, a spark of inspiration lighting up in his eyes. "You know, that's not a bad idea. Let's make it happen." Within weeks, the fountain Daniel envisioned became a centerpiece in the garden, a symbol of new beginnings. Engraved at its base were the words, "In honor of those who bring light to the world." As the foundation gained momentum, it began to garner attention from the broader community. Local media featured stories about Mia's Haven, highlighting its impact on families and children. Donations poured in, allowing Jason and Emma to expand their efforts. They opened a second center in a nearby neighborhood, bringing the same sense of hope and possibility to more people. Despite their growing responsibilities, Jason and Emma made time for quiet moments with Daniel and Clara. Sunday evenings became their tradition, a time for family dinners, storytelling, and laughter. Jason, who had once avoided emotional connections, found himself deeply invested in the lives of Emma and her children. He taught Daniel how to sketch architectural designs and often joined Clara in her favorite board games, much to her delight. One evening, as they sat in the garden under the glow of string lights, Jason turned to Emma. "You've changed everything," he said quietly. "Not just the mansion, but me. I don't know how to thank you." Emma smiled, her eyes reflecting the warmth of the moment. "You don't have to thank me, Jason. You just have to keep moving forward and keep letting people in." Jason nodded, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The Harlow estate had become more than a home or a foundation. It was a haven, not just for the community, but for Jason, Emma, and their growing family. Months later, the transformation of the Harlow estate into Mia's Haven was complete, and its impact reverberated far beyond Jason's original vision. The foundation had become a pillar of hope for the community, offering educational programs, art workshops, and counseling services to families in need. For Jason, it symbolized a rebirth, a way to honor Mia's memory while forging new connections and a deeper sense of purpose. Emma and Jason's partnership had grown into something profound, rooted in mutual respect and shared goals. One afternoon, as Emma walked through the garden, she marveled at how far they had all come. The once intimidating estate was now a welcoming sanctuary, with children laughing as they played and families finding comfort in each other's company. Jason approached Emma, holding a stack of letters.
"These are from the kids we've helped,"
he said, handing her one with a proud smile. Emma opened it, her eyes welling up as she read the words of gratitude. "This is why we do it," she said softly. Jason nodded. "And it's only the beginning. I want to expand Mia's Haven to other cities. Here is so much more we can do." Emma's smile widened. "Count me in. We'll make it happen together." The following weekend, Jason invited Emma, Daniel, and Clara to a special dinner at the estate. The garden was aglow with fairy lights, and the table was set with their favorite dishes. As they gathered, Jason raised a glass. "To second chances," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "To the people who remind us what truly matters, and to the family we choose to build." Daniel and Clara beamed, their excitement filling the air. "Does this mean we're part of the family now?" Clara asked, her eyes shining with hope. Jason smiled warmly. "You've always been part of the family," he said, glancing at Emma, who nodded in agreement. As the night went on, the conversations flowed effortlessly, laughter filling the garden. Jason realized how much he had gained: companionship, purpose, and a newfound sense of belonging. For years, he had built walls around himself to keep the world out. But now, those walls had been replaced with bridges, connecting him to the people who mattered most. In the final moments of the evening, Jason looked up at the stars, his heart full. "Thank you, Mia," he whispered, "for showing me the way, even when I couldn't see it myself." Emma reached for his hand, and together they gazed at the sky, knowing they had created something truly extraordinary, a legacy of love and healing. As time passed, Mia's Haven became a cornerstone of the community, with its programs transforming the lives of countless families. Jason, Emma, and their team expanded their reach, opening 2 more centers in nearby cities. Each new location carried Mia's spirit, offering safe spaces for children and families to grow, heal, and thrive. Emma's leadership became a beacon of hope for other single mothers. She shared her story at events and fundraisers, often with Jason by her side. Together, they inspired donors, volunteers, and families to believe in the power of second chance. "If someone like Jason can turn his life around," Emma often said. Back at the original estate, Daniel and Clara had made themselves at home. The siblings thrived in the nurturing environment, with Daniel excelling in art and Clara finding her love for storytelling. Jason had become a mentor to them both, teaching Daniel architectural drawing and cheering Clara on during her storytelling competition. One sunny afternoon, Daniel presented Jason with a drawing, a vibrant rendition of the estate's garden, complete with happy families and children playing. At the bottom, in Daniel's neat handwriting, were the words, "Where Hope Grows." Jason framed the drawing and hung it in the mansion's main hall, a daily reminder of why they had started this journey. Years later, on the anniversary of Mia's Haven's opening, the estate hosted its biggest celebration. Families, volunteers, and staff gathered to honor the foundation's success and the lives it had changed. Jason stood at the center of the garden, his heart full as he looked around. Emma joined him, holding a speech she had prepared for the occasion. As Emma took the stage, her voice carried through the crowd. This place was built on the idea that no one should have to face life's challenges alone. It's a testament to the power of community and the courage to believe in new beginnings. Jason's vision made this possible, but it's all of you, our volunteers, families, and supporters, who keep it alive. The crowd erupted into applause, and Jason couldn't help but smile. When Emma stepped down, Daniel and Clara ran up to hug her, their laughter ringing out across the garden. Jason watched them, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. As the evening drew to a close, Jason gathered Emma, Daniel, and Clara for a quiet moment by the engraved words at its base, "In honor of those who bring light to the world," gleamed under the moonlight. Jason turned to Emma, his voice filled with emotion. "I thought my life was complete with wealth and success, but I was wrong. It wasn't complete until I met all of..." Emma smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "And we're not done yet. Here is still so much more to do." Together, they looked out at the garden, now bustling with life and love, a reflection of the legacy they had built and the family they had become.